Hey, yo, what a dip, y'all. Let's get right into it. With GGG announcing that there was going to be an extension on the Legacy of Phrecia event, I figured it's about time for me to go ahead and actually talk about one of the two driving points for the event, the Ascendancies. The Ascendancies actually spawned a number of discussion topics for me that I would love to cover. But in this video in particular, we're going to talk about how they've panned out so far compared to their initial theory crafting. And I'll reflect a little bit on some of the hits or misses from my predictions in my rankings video that I did before the event actually started. The best way to facilitate this discussion is actually just to kind of take a peek at everything going on via the ladder, right? And if you take a quick look at POE Ninja, it's a pretty heavily top-sided look there, right? 50% of softcore trade is playing one of three ascendancies: Scavenger, Blind Prophet, or Ancestral Commander. And if you add in Whisper and Surfcaster, we're at basically 75% of the player base playing 5 ascendancies. And that does not surprise me, not even almost a little bit. These are ascendancies that all looked really strong just up front, or had some insane showings in terms of what people were able to theory craft on these ascendancies before going in. What matter of that is because they simply put the hours behind it because they were interested in what the actual potential of the ascendancies to be debated. But this is what we have to work with, right? Now, speaking of what we have to work with, I personally hate using popularity as a measurement performance, but I like to deal in empiricals more than anecdoticals, and that's what we've got, right? For other thoughts, including if you want some more like anecdotal thoughts or more purely theoretical opinions as opposed to things that we have data to look at now, come check me out on Twitch, right? That's in the description. You can get a lot more of the latent thoughts, of the unfiltered thoughts, of the undiluted thoughts, if you will, over there. Now, let's go take a closer look at the 5 ascendancies I mentioned already, and then I'll talk about a couple others towards the end as well that just don't deserve full analyses, if you will. Starting off the list is definitely got to be Scavenger. It is the #1 most played ascendancy in softcore trade, and I vastly underestimated how many people were going to play Power Siphon Locust Mines. Like, and that is what I am boiling this down to, because Scavenger is played with 3 build types: PS Locust Mines, Righteous Fire, Hexblast Mines. But Power Siphon is almost half of them. And honestly, I'm just more shocked because I kind of forgot that this is the ascendancy that best supports what I would say is probably the best league starter in the game for all-purpose league starter, right? Like, this is a very, very comfortable league. So if you have not played PS Locust Mines yet in any form on any ascendancy so far, you have to try it on one of them before the skill gets nerfed in 97 years. We get 326, right? Don't worry, you've got plenty of time. Now, I don't think I would have rated this ascendancy any differently in my rankings, only because I think that other ascendancies are actually stronger than it in a vacuum. But it's really hard to compete with top starters. Like, it supports 3 really popular starters as one ascendancy. And it is the best in slot pick for 2, if not all 3 of them. So, shouldn't be too surprised that this is this popular one week in. Now, of course, I put all of my shot on the Power Siphon side because, like, Righteous Fire and Hexblast are known quantities for sure. That are also, like, Hexblast players don't really have an ascendancy to go to besides, like, Servant of Arakali, which I do think Scavenger is just a little bit stronger on the top end. And RF is RF. If you're an RF player, you already know you're an RF player. And I don't even got to tell you what you need to know about that, because Pox is the man and he will take you where you need to be, right? And he brought y'all to Scavenger this time. So Scavenger it is. It'd just be like that. Now we get to talk about an ascendancy that I definitely should have ranked differently. Because I said in my pre-event ranking video that I genuinely felt that Blind Prophet had a real case for #1. And I'm mad that I didn't trust myself on this. I got hesitant around it because, you know, everybody was really rating the speed of Surfcaster highly, and also the worried about the blind from Sightless, even though blind is only 20% accuracy reduction. Like, it's very dealable. And 12 base crit is bonkers, but I kind of just needed to wait for people to feel how bonkers that is for me to really be able to, like, push this through. That, of course, is not the only reason this ascendancy is so strong, though. The other half of what makes this ascendancy so insane is directionless, right? 50% Nimbus effect is just ridiculous, right? You don't have to run returning proj, which means you still get the support back, but you also don't actually have to invest in the Nimbus to get that level of power out of your character. And it really puts this Ascendancy in a very nice position to just balloon in power. And this is clearly backed up by the fact that 98% of blind profits in softcore trade have clicked directionless. Like 98%. Very, very few people are even touching the Ascendancy if it cannot play directionless, which is what I said ahead of the event. I said that this Ascendancy is for attack projectiles that are not played on a wand and make use of directionless. That was my prediction. And it is just that good, right? Now, this also could definitely be so popular because it just perfectly enables what is probably the strongest skill in the game at the moment overall, Lightning Strike. Just if you don't know why that skill is so nuts, just know that it's nuts and the numbers are ridiculous and the clear is ridiculous and the speed is ridiculous and the defenses available to it are ridiculous. Just know that Lightning Strike is just a little bit too perfectly positioned in the game at the moment, basically. That's all I can really put into this video without making this video 3 times as long just to talk about the bullshit that is Lightning Strike, quite frankly. Now, let's go ahead and round out the top 3. Ancestral Commander, which this Ascendancy is a master class in the understanding that players just sometimes don't feel like dying. Dying is tilting as hell, and having an Ascendancy that makes it this hard for you to die is insane. This Ascendancy is actually even more appealing to me than Juggernaut, even though if you've been a long viewer of mine or just you've been in my chat or you're a friend of mine, you know that I don't like Jug at all because I feel like the Ascendancy offers no offensive power. But this game has so many strong skills and interactions and gearing options and so on that sometimes all your Ascendancy needs to do is bring you immunity. If you're just effectively immune because of your Ascendancy, you could do whatever you want on your gear to make your damage work, right? And Ancestral Commander does just that. It's a uniquely, purely defensive Ascendancy, and it's really good at that. And as far as the build that people are making most utilization of it with, it is a quote-unquote new one. And I'm only saying quote-unquote there because Jung is not the progenitor of this build. I've seen generals cry tech slams of Cataclysm since tech slam of Cataclysm was added, but this is definitely the build that popularizes it. Now that there's, a really beefy Ascendancy that also actually adds a little bit of damage to it because of the +3 endurance charges, right? That you can also then Forbidden Flesh Flame into the 4th if you really wanted, right? Like it is a really strong build already that was juiced up by this Ascendancy. And if you're not familiar with the build, I strongly recommend checking it out. It just looks super comfy. And it even manages to use Cyclone in the big 2025. So like if you want to use Cyclone in a character as well, like again, check that shit out. Let's quickly take a moment to like actually reflect on these 3 Ascendancies as a unit before I go on to talk about the others. And it's mostly because I like the fact that the top 3 kind of points at 2 differing ways to look at Ascendancy power, right? And it's the sense that sometimes an Ascendancy strength is unviewable outside of the lens of balancing and popularity, right? Like just calling it what it is for a second. Meta is determined by what people deem is to be powerful and popular, right? And so when you look at the difference between like Ancestral Commander's build of choice and Scavenger and Blind Prophet, it's interesting that Ancestral Commander just is a build that most people had never really heard of before, right? Like Tech Slam of Cataclysm is one of those skills that people used to mention to me, like friends would mention to me. I'd be like, oh my God, why are you doing this to yourself, right? Because it was strong, but it was kind of off to the wayside and not properly supported, a little jank, right? But now it's properly supported and suddenly it's strong enough to become popular because then Jung shouted it out. And so it's always really interesting to see how all aspects have to come together to make a build not only powerful, but popular, including the Ascendancy and the skill. And this is just a direct contrast to Scavenger and Blind Prophet, who really are just souped up enablers for already known to be insanely powerful builds, right? PS Locust Mines, Lightning Strike, Hex Blast, Righteous Fire, right? Builds that people already were going crazy on before. That's like a mini thought here. There's a full video to be made out of this at some point in the future, but it's just something that to be like aware of when you think about like the actual strength of ascendancies. We'll get more to that to this point later on into the video. That later is not now though. Right now we should actually talk about Whisper because I have some thoughts. I heard some whispers through the grapevine that this ascendancy was not everything that it was cracked up to be. And let me just get this out of my system real quick. I fucking called it. Many people told me that I was kind of going crazy for not being willing to rank Whisperer that high. But I called that it was a one-trick pony of an ascendancy, right? It is a one-trick pony that really relies on one set of items to really do its one-trick pony thing, including an item that people are finding out is actually rare as hell, right? And at its ceiling, it is really, really strong. But I called that the suffering that it would be to get this build to that point was not going to be worth it for a lot of people. Now, if you made it through the struggle, ooh, the character's going crazy. But, you know, we shouldn't rate ascendancies based on purely what they look like at their top end, right? Like the low end for a mana stack for this type of archetype, this archetype in particular, this version of it, right? Because mana stacking caster works really well because Archmage enables so much ridiculousness alongside the general tankiness of Hierophant plus Mind Over Matter being in close proximity rather than requiring you to get a Cloak of Defiance. Like that is what makes Archmage Hierophants so powerful early. And you don't actually have that in Whisperer. And that's what was really missing. Because if you make it through the struggle, this build is insane, right? Like KBF clustering and Manforce era setups are both ridiculous and have insanely high ceilings. And if you made it through the struggle, you are going to love this character. Or if you're re-rolling into it, you're going to love that character. You just have to get through the struggle first, right? Or get around the struggle. That's all I'm saying. Rounding out the top 5, our top 75% of the things that people are playing, Surfcaster. And I have the most perspective here because this is, of course, what I've actually been playing. And we have to start out just by referencing my blind prophet thoughts. Because if you watched my pre-event rankings video, then you know that I said that blind prophet and Surfcaster were 2 and 1 respectively, and that I was willing to give blind prophet number 1. And I said earlier that I would now give blind prophet number 1. Because yes, I'm perfectly comfortable moving Surfcaster down to 2. I think that this feel is top notch, but I think that the skills available to Surfcaster to really maximize what it does are just not as strong as LS plus Blind Prophet really is together, right? Like, it doesn't matter how many other options you can actually put on Surfcaster and feel really good about when LS and Blind Prophet together is just a ridiculous combo, quite frankly. Now, that said, number 1, number 2 for Surfcaster doesn't really matter because they were always like basically 1A, 1B in my head. And I just had to say 1, 2 for the video, right? But you're seeing it in PoE Ninja that Surfcaster has that breadth of playstyles of just all of them feeling good and having the mechanics that feel good from years and years of playing the game that you love to see it, right? I'm playing it on Penance, Brand of Dissipation, which, almost 40% of the Surfcasters are playing, or almost 35% of the Surfcasters are playing it on Penance, Brand of Dissipation. And then you've also got the LS characters. You've got the Power Siphon Miners. You got Exsanguinate Miners. You've got Spark, and so on. And while the other skills have straggler skills, I'm highlighting these here because if you look at the other ascendancies, half or more can be pretty easily dominated by 1 to 2 skills. Whereas like Penance Brand here has the most dominant skill in Surfcaster is only 34-35% of the player base. And I think that's a really interesting like distinction. And it's just because there's all the different scaling packages that are available, right? Whether it be through the self-show package, the fishing route package, the general just conversion abuse package. There's stuff with like using the shock prolif for impulses. You have a lot of different ways to actually pilot this ascendancy. And while the same can be said for other ascendancies, especially Scavenger kind of coalesced around a couple of builds rather than people just kind of like playing, again, the who's of good skills over the past like 5+ years of PoE, right? Plus, more importantly, we all just love being fast. Let's be real for a second. We just love being fast. Now, before I close out this video, I've got a couple other things I want to mention, but just not at the same depth, right? 1, Aristocrat. mainly I need to acknowledge that I made the same mistake with Aristocrat that other people made with Whisper, which is like I completely forgot to weigh in how miserable the start of the Ascendancy is. I still think its ceiling looks pretty nuts from what I've been seeing of some friends, but the start is misery. And the only difference between Aristocrat and Whisper in this sense is that everybody hyped up Whisper and nobody really talked about Aristocrat before the start. Right. So that's one. Two, Daughter of Ashabi. I am pleasantly surprised with the performance of the empowered shrines that it does give within the Ascendancy. And that makes me go, it's not actually as bad as I did initially predict. And I mean, it's represented by the fact that I think like 3% of the player base are actually playing Daughter of Ashabi, which is more than I would have expected if I'm being quite honest with you. Like it actually looks decently functional, and the shrineage is pretty funny. Like it's really cool when the acceleration shrine goes off and it's just trying to fight like going like crazy. Like it's a cool ass ascendancy, if nothing else. And lastly, tap dancing on the corpse of polytheist, because yeah, it's polytheist. I don't think I have to add more to that. I just need to really one more at the polytheist button because I'm just so bothered by how poorly designed that ascendancy is. Now, all that said, these analyses are very limited in scope and value because, well, this league is smaller than an actual league start, right? And also, we're only a week in. You don't really get to see good experimentation and utilization of new mechanics until like 2, 3, maybe even 4 weeks in. It's just people don't experiment during opening week, right? We've all kind of been conditioned, if you will, to play PoE safely in the first week and then experiment afterwards, right? You got to get a strong, solid league start to get your currency up, is what it is. Now, I don't really expect it to happen during the event, but it did get extended, so it's possible that people will get to cooking. Now, on that note, I have some thoughts about the fact that it does get extended, which are not really worth making the focal point of a video, but it's worth just noting here, which is I'm glad they're extending it, mostly because it's something cool to do, or you can go back to play Settlers if you want, right? Like that's up to you. It was very, very easily foreseen though, and I don't know why they even pretended that the league only being 1 month long was a good idea. I don't know. I think it was just to try to keep it from clashing with the PoE 2 stuff until they realize, again, PoE 1 players that really love PoE 1 don't actually really want that much to do with PoE 2 sometimes, is what it is. Now, personally, this delay does not actually impact how much I'll be playing the event or how I'm going to be engaging with the event. But at least, again, it's something for everybody else. I have other thoughts about the event, but that's going to come in a future video because I'm pretty sure you've noticed all of the footage since the event and on my stream if you've been there, it's all Sanctum. And that has a reasoning, quite frankly, which, again, future video. Speaking of the stream, if you want to hear more of these types of thoughts, if you just want to ask ahead of time to get a little bit of like what it is, or you'll probably hear it in passing, even if you're just lurking, quite frankly, that link is in the description. There's also a Discord in the description. You can get more thoughts there, or ask me questions, whatever. Join the discussion, join the community, all that good stuff. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.